We're talking about the Fruitful Pursuit series of beers.
We make this series using like fresh whole fruits.
Where did you learn to make beers like this? Tell me more.
Kind of what you hinted at there. There is like these classics, and they are very like.
There's a reason they're classics.
They're theoretical like bucket list fruit.
Next time I'm
too.
getting one of those big cleavers, just go chop, 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 chop. Hi, I'm Greg Zeschuk from the Blind Enthusiasm Brewing Company, and I'm here with Doug Checknita, the head brewer and blender, and we're talking about the Fruitful Pursuit series of beers. We've got a couple of releases coming out really soon, and we thought it'd take some time to have a little chit-chat on camera, as people do these days. Everyone's got a podcast, and we've got one now too. Doug, you can't laugh on camera.
Of course I can.
Of course you can. So, on a serious note, we make beer. We make Fruitful Pursuit beers. What is the Fruitful Pursuit series? Tell me about it. What is the purpose of it?
So the Fruitful Pursuit series, I believe the name was your idea. Very like fun
I think so.
And
yeah, kind
punny
of
name.
Jovial kind of thing.
But it really like the reason we went with it. It really encapsulated what we were trying to do with the program. We make this series using like fresh whole fruits, and they're not just one type of fermentation method either. It goes across all of the different fermentation and blend types that we do at the brewery. But it's just a series of fruit beers that use whole fruit, first use of those fruits, and we use like a very broad range of fruits as well.
Cool. What I was thinking today, we'd actually get a little technical, as comfortable as you are revealing our secrets. But really, I mean, this is an opportunity for folks that maybe make beer or want to make this kind of stuff. Sort of fresh fruit beer, how we do it a little bit. Obviously nothing super secret, but general information that folks might like. What was the inspiration for these? I mean, obviously this I kind of know the answer to this a little bit, but where did you learn to make beers like this? Tell me more.
So yeah, basically everywhere that I've learned to make fruit beers, the inspiration has come from the Belgians. So the brewers making delicious lambic.
Kind of like the Belgian lambics,
yeah, delicious lambic. But I've learned it from like Andre Trudel at Trudel and other breweries and stuff like that. But the methods all stem from the lambic guys, and that's
so
the main point.
What's the general points on that? Like they re-ferment on the fruits, one of the whole fruit, and then they re-ferment. What's the scoop kind of thing?
Yeah, so in the modern context, because there is like a long tradition of this, and there's many ways that it's been done over the years, but in the modern context, it's a high amount of fruit used on a blend of different barrels. So you're making your blend, you're using your fruit at a high rate, so between 300 and 400 grams per liter, sometimes higher.
Yeah, so like we're talking like almost a hybrid in some cases.
Yeah, it's getting into that hybrid of wine and beer and everything. And then it's done in like a stainless steel tank. So traditionally, they could have done this in barrels, or they would have done it before stainless tanks was like the standard. But stainless steel tank to reduce oxygen, and then they're using the whole fruits. But then those fruits are like processed in some way, so either cut up and de-pitted or just crushed, or depending on the fruit that you're using.
One thing that sets us significantly apart from other kind of modern fruit beers, a lot are using purees, a lot are using extracts. Those are sterile products, and in a lot of cases, right? Is that the big difference of what we're doing?
Yeah, I mean, I like what we're doing is by no means to say it's like,
I'm not saying it's the best.
Yeah,
I'm just saying it's
not to say it's the best or anything. It's just a point of comparison for sure. But I think it's important to say that, because I think when people think of some products like this, they think like there's levels to it, or that like one is better than the other. But it's really comes down to what you get out of each product. And sterility with the purees and stuff is definitely like a big benefit of using them. And with your typical like ale or lager, when you're doing that, it's kind of a necessity.
Yeah,
it's hard to work and make a consistent product the way that you need to when making those products. And keep your brewery like microbiologically safe. Yeah. So you really need to do that with those products, and then also like having the facilities and equipment to like process the fruit too. With most breweries, they don't have, like for us, like maceration tanks with a false bottom where all the solids will stay in the tank and you separate nice clean liquid. When you have purees, it keeps the solids, in some cases, non-existent. It can be like a very like juice-like puree, or it makes it so it's like much easier to remove those solids and have them settle. So when we're using the whole fruits for us, it's one, traditional, but two, it's where we find the best results for our beers. And because our beers already have been gone through like either mixed or spontaneous fermentation, that involves in some cases upwards of like hundreds of microorganisms, we're not really too worried about like contamination because
we're pretty stable. Like we're not worried about what's going to happen.
Yeah, our product at that point in time has spent 1 to 4 years in barrel fermenting, so it's quite stable, and the pH is low enough that that also is a buffer for any new microorganisms. There's not going to be a whole lot of new stuff that can survive in the environment of our beer.
Our harsh environment is protective in a way. You got alcohol, you got pH, you got a very aggressive microflora, microorganisms within the beer already. Right?
Absolutely, and that's similar in wine and stuff like that too. The pH is one of the, for lack of a better term, like preservative qualities of it, right? So,
and there's no other additions, as I understand it. We don't use any sulfites. We don't do any kind of jazz like that. Like where wineries use a lot of sulfites in their wines and stuff. We don't use anything like that typically, right?
Yeah, and that again also goes to two things: the use of stainless steel tanks for primary, but also the base that it's going on is it's already pretty oxygen reacted out at that point from the time it's in the barrel. From being in the barrel, but also because we're in stainless tanks, we'll use low oxygen environment. So we're not too worried about the juice becoming contaminated because of that pH and everything like that. And then we're not too worried about oxygen reaction because we're purging the tanks with CO2. We treat the beer like you would your ale or lager, where you're going as low amount of oxygen as possible pick up. And that's to retain the quality of the fruit character, because we've all seen like a piece of fruit decay on a counter. The longer it's
so
out.
Oxygen hurts fruit just the way it hurts beer, doesn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and then it also, any oxygen, the small amount of oxygen you'd get from the fruit will actually purge CO2 through before we transfer the beer on.
Oh, I see. So you kind of further push that oxygen.
Yeah, we're trying to reduce the oxygen pickup as much as possible. And then any bit of like oxygen that's left usually helps. It's down into like the parts per billion at that part, like awesome. Very low pickup. But you're getting into like it goes through that secondary fermentation like you talked about. And that's going to help kickstart the fermentation as opposed to go into like decay of product quality side of it.
Right. If you look at the Belgian lambic tradition and the Belgian fruit beers, the fruit lambics, there are a certain set of fruits that you always see. You always see cherry. You always see raspberry. What goes into choosing which fruits that you use? Like what when you're sitting down and say, I want to use a certain type of fruit, rather than kind of like, because we've done some that are like routine, but we've also done some different ones. Like what are you thinking about? What are you looking for in a fruit to use in a beer?
Yeah, that's actually like a really good question, but it's actually one of like the most fun parts of getting to do this series is sometimes there is the tradition of it. So like cherry and raspberries, we just released in February the cherry beer, and I was actually very reluctant to do cherries.
I had to convince Doug of that one. Doug was like, it
was a lot of people actually convinced, but it kind of what you hinted at there is like these classics, and they are very like
there's a reason they're classics.
Well, that's what that's the conclusion I've come to now, being like,
they sound like hotcakes. Get it while you can, because we're gonna run out of that one pretty quick.
But it's also people like it, but also like the flavors work really well with the beer. Cherries is one of those ones like it took some convincing, because it took a while with the help of Steve and Dan to find the right cherries. I didn't want to just use any cherry, and like the quality of the fruit is really important for this. But when choosing the fruits to use, like finding the right fruit, and apricot was very similar to this, is one of the big motivators. So once we found the right cherries, and you and a number of other people had convinced me, I came around on it.
I wasn't pushing too hard, but other people were kind of.
Well, but it's actually now like in one of my favorite ones, and I was saying that reluctantly for a little bit, but the cherry's a classic for a reason. It just works so well with the fermentation qualities and everything in the beer. So that's one way of choosing them, and then other ones are just out of sheer curiosity. So. Like I have a theoretical like bucket list fruit, which is high bush cranberries, and you can forage for them in like the River Valley and Edmonton and stuff like that, and they're super tart. They're kind of like a little bit like overripe and stinky, but with the acidity from them and the tannin qualities of them, and like you get these huge spice notes off the seeds. I think it would be like a perfect fruit to go into the beer. So there's qualities like that go into them, and these curiosities of trying different fruits, and that's another strain of doing it. There's like the classics, the curiosity, and then there's what's happened as well in recent years, which is suggestion.
Yeah, so we've got. I mean, there's one we both go to, which of course is Quince. We never would have. We've had some occasional. You and I actually were at in London at the Colonel, had a Quince beer. We've had occasional Quince beers. And we're like, this has potential. And then
and that was actually, the Colonel was after we had already made ours too.
That's true, actually.
But it was really funny because the story is kind of serendipitous like that.
Yeah.
In that Steve from Steve and Dan's had been harping on me because we had been buying fruit from him for a couple of years at that point about trying quince, and I had had like quince jelly and some quince pies because that's like a typical English thing.
Doesn't come to like the first choice.
No,
quince,
and
right?
and even then I was like very ignorant to what quince actually were.
Yeah.
But Steve was harping on me, and then our former chef Christine Sanford had suggested it. Well, and then I was like, at that point I was like, okay, we got two people who I really respect their opinion on flavor and food, and then Steve and Dan, obviously, like they're the fruit guys, so they know, and they've tried so much of our beer at that point. And then a couple of weeks later, you and I had actually tried a quince beer from Four Winds. That was it at a beer share we were at. And then by that point, I was like fully convinced that we had to at least try it.
Yeah.
And now for me personally, that's my favorite beer in the Fruitful Pursuit series. It's also one of my favorite beers that we do.
Yeah.
Because the quince are so unique. The flavor goes so well with the beer. The texture is amazing. It highlights acidity really well. Like everything, it crosses all the checks all the boxes for me in what would make a good fruit beer. The thing is, it's like the way I was in the beginning. Lots of people don't know what quince is as well. So
it's a trickier one to sell, but I mean, when people try it, they're blown away. Like it's been one of our multiple award winners. Like that's been a real.
So when it comes to picking fruits, there's many reasons to go with it. If you want to get like down to a little more technical,
acidity is a factor, right?
Yeah. So every fruit has like a baseline range of acidity, like total acidity and pH that they exist in. And that's like when you're eating an apple, you don't realize this when you're eating it, but your palate reacts very specifically to the pH range and the total acidity.
So an apple's fairly acidic.
Yeah, it'd be like on the medium side for fruits, because like you get down into like lemons and stuff like that at one end, and then up to like blueberries on the other end, which are very high acidity in comparison. Still acidity, but for fruit, pretty high acidity. So when you're looking at our beers, that like acidity is a core flavor and of what makes up the beers. When you're choosing the fruits, you have to kind of balance that, knowing that if they're too high, like blueberry is a really hard one, even though we've done it.
Yeah, we did it.
But we did it in a very particular way.
Yeah.
Is a very hard fruit in beer to work with, one, because it's water content, so it's pretty dilute in terms of flavor. You end up with
a very dilute product.
Yeah, but then also because the pH is typically like lower in that fruit, when you put it into beer, especially a beer like ours where the acidity is a little bit more pronounced, it's going to throw off what your palate is used to tasting blueberries at. So like if you're used to like a more like the blueberries you get at the grocery store, if you put that with like a ton of lemon juice, just eat them in like a dilute way, it almost come across like weird tasting. So some fruits you can't really work with in our beer, and that's a big consideration easily, or you have to pair them with another fruit to kind of help balance that kind of like dilution factor and acidity. And the same thing goes the other way. Like lemons are really hard to work with because it's like all they really enhance is like acidity. So you're going to get lemon character, but then your beer's going to be like an acid bomb. And that's like we've touched on in many of our different videos.
Stay balanced,
Yeah, balance is like the key to all of it.
So what's we've actually, I personally have been involved in many of them, but just we seem to process fruit in a variety of different ways. Can you touch on those ways and what the goal is, like what you're trying to accomplish from it? Like talking a bit about the ranges we use and what are you trying to do?
Yeah, so every fruit has its own is unique.
Some we cut in half, some we smush.
Every fruit's unique in the way. But like stone fruits, typically you want to cut them in half and then remove the pits. The reason for that is you need to break up most fruits at least a little bit so that you're going to get the extraction. Stone fruits often have like pretty thick skins in terms of like breaking apart during fermentation.
So is that like carbonic maceration, where it ferments from the inside and kind of like explodes?
It's a type of carbonic maceration. Nowadays, carbonic maceration is often thought of as like you put the fruit into a stainless vessel, you fill it with CO2, so it's a really low oxygen environment, and let it do its thing. But because we're putting it in the beer, it's kind of like a carbonic maceration. And it is, especially in fruits like the cherry, where we leave them whole.
In a way too,
yeah, but it's also not just in a CO2 environment. There is a little bit of like liquid breakdown and stuff. But for some fruits, it's a type of carbonic maceration. But like for this, going back to the stone fruits, when you cut them in half, it opens up to like all the pulp and everything inside. So there's access, and they'll more naturally break down just from like the beer penetrating through osmosis the cell structure of the cellulose structure of like the pulp and everything like that. And then we take out the pits, because in those fruits, the stone fruit is actually like incredibly flavor intense.
Yeah, like strong. I mean, people don't realize the super strong flavor.
Oh yeah. So like amaretto, for example, they make that by like putting in stone fruit pits, and that's a big flavor, and it's intense. And we've taken those pits and actually made some small batches with them, but the flavor is like intense. So you can actually take away from the delicacy of like stone fruits. For plum,
kind of overshadow your beer. It'll
overshadow the fruit itself, because they don't tend to be like those more fresh flavors. They're more like marzipan and nuttiness and spices and things like that. Yeah. So you like for peaches, for example, you'd lose that really soft, juicy, floral kind of characters you get with those. So that's a really important thing. But cherry, on the other hand, this is a different type of processing. So one, we don't remove the pits on the cherry, because the flavor of those pits really help enhance the cherry character. It helps carry the cherry character.
Very nice, yeah.
The boys was like,
we have a slogan around here: Carrie's cherry character, and you're supposed to put that in every video. Just FYI.
But we actually do something called freeze processing. So where some fruits, they're like the stone fruits, where we want to cut them in half. The cherries are like way too small to go through.
Yeah, you
cut them in half and get a pit. But also they're really susceptible to like bruising and breaking down. And cherries are very, very oxygen unstable. So like that really bright color, you're gonna lose it. The more oxygen, it's gonna turn brown. You've probably seen this if you've purchased cherry juice from like the store. Often it's like kind of brown and not really all that red. And that'll come from like too much oxygen interacting with the tannin. So if we wanted to like crush the cherries and de-pit them and all that, it'd just be too much. And besides, we want the pits in there. So we do something.
And we really do want that bright color as well.
Yeah, right? And the color is super important. So what we do is we actually will flash freeze the cherries when they're harvested. And it's like a very quick freeze. It's been proven to retain aromatics and flavor compounds really well.
Kind of breaks them apart?
And then, as they thaw, once you put them into the beer, that thawing process and the freezing will actually burst the cells of the fruit. And they'll actually then carbonically macerate much easier. So they'll break down. So when we take the fruit out, the cherries are no longer in one piece. They've split, they've opened, and they've clearly extracted everything we want.
So really, every fruit has a unique kind of method.
I mean, those are two methods. I mean, the last method would be like crushing or cutting. So like the apples we did this year, that's not released yet. It just got bottled. So don't hold your breath for that one. But it's
tasting good though, but not for a while.
Tasting fantastic. But we did the cider method, where it's like we put them through a grinder and just ground them up. And it's a very similar thing for the quince. We just chopped it up by hand.
I remember when we froze the quince one year. First year we did them by hand. The second year, let's try freezing them.
Yeah,
I almost lost part of my thumb on that one.
Yeah, you were using a nice serrated knife.
Yeah, it was a good day, good times.
But the first year, classic.
They're hard to cut regardless.
Yeah, well, and that was like the learning experience with quinces. Classically, like apples for people who will make cider at home, freezing their apples and letting them like break apart that way is like a really common way to make cider. Process apples for cider at home. And we thought with the quince it would be the same, and we were sorely mistaken. So we don't freeze the quince anymore. But now so that year we thawed them, and they were still like very, really like intact. They're very like
they're tough.
Well, yeah, they have a really like interesting cellulose structure, and they're very dense, but it's very susceptible to freezing apparently. And then they also have really thick skins, so I think the skin also kind of held them together.
Next time
I'm
getting one of those big cleavers, just go chop, 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 chop.
Yeah, we tried that too though, and
they were shooting all over the place.
Yeah, they're so hard that they kind of shoot all over the place.
Yeah, you can't stabilize them very easily.
But after success grinding the apples, we actually think for the next time we're just going to use like an apple grinder and crush the quince, because we tried cutting them in quarters the first year. The second year we cut them into eighths.
Yes, I remember.
And then after the success with the apples this year, next time we're able to, because that's another point to chat about in a bit, but is like fruit availability year to year based off how the growing season was and stuff like that.
Environmental concerns. Yeah.
But yeah, next time we do quince, we're going to like grind it as well. So those are kind of your three main processing methods. It's like cutting and depitting, freezing, and then like a classic crushing. So destemming and crushing would be like grape varietals as well, but different crusher than your apple crusher.
Cool. I've got two questions left. One is we've done a couple beers where we use the fruit a second time. What's the criteria in that case? Just intactness of the fruit? Like we'll use it for one beer, then we'll put a second beer on top of it. And we've had some great results with that. What's your criteria for reusing fruit for a second run? Yeah,
it's pretty simple. There's only really a couple criteria. It's whether or not there's actually enough solids to do a second beer. So, for example, stone fruits, plums, and apricots and peach are very water or juice heavy fruits. So by the time fermentation is done and like the extraction into the beer through osmosis and stuff, there's basically only a small amount of pulp and skins in the bottom, and everything else has gone into solution, for lack of a better term, into the beer. So there's not really anything left at all anyways to put the beer onto, and the stuff that's left is very bland and it's tannin heavy and gross. And then when it comes to things like berries, some berries are the same way. Like the extraction is too good in the beer, so there's nothing really left. And then you have something like currants or cherries, where there's a robust amount of flavor and texture, and with the seeds, they'll make a really good second beer. Got it. So you really just need something to add to the beer left. When you use them the second time, however, there's not a second fermentation like there is the first time. So when you first use the fruit, all the sugars and everything get fermented.
So it's different.
So yeah, the extraction more comes through like a pure balancing extraction, where it's actually like extracting chemically.
Yes, got it.
So if there's nothing there, you can't really do anything.
Cool. Hey, and one thing I want to mention, of course, is at the blindenthusiasm.ca website, you can purchase all of our beers. And in particular, we have all the available, only one missing from the past, Fruitful Pursuit beers. A lot of them are moving very quickly, so I would recommend you get there soon. blindenthusiasm.ca. So one final question with these fruit beers. Obviously, we can cellar all of our beers for years and years and years, and you and I have had the pleasure of enjoying cellared fruit beers at a place like Cantillon and Dre Fontaine. What do you anticipate in terms of cellaring and how they'll proceed over time in the cellar?
So yeah, you'll see a trend to like everything. It depends on the fruit.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, with fruit beers, it's better, in my opinion, maybe let me reframe this. If you want to retain like bright fruity character, it's best to like drink them young.
Drink fresh. Yeah.
Drink them fresh. Drink them young. In that first like 2 years of their life, they're gonna retain the most of that like bright, fresh fruit character that we are striving for from using like high dosage rates for shorter amounts of time and things like that. But certain fruits will definitely develop really interestingly over time. So one of the things you alluded to was like trying the raspberry beer. I think it was like a 2000 or
89 or 87 or
yeah,
something.
Yeah, it was like a late 80s, early 90s.
It was like 30 plus years when we tried it.
Yeah, it was. But yeah, getting that out of the cellar, like one of the most obvious things about it was like the color was gone. There was no red left in it. And that's like with the bottles, with the cork, there's a small amount of oxygen exchange over time. And that's part of what helps them develop and keep interesting over time. But in a raspberry beer, it stripped the color. And it lost some of its like bright raspberry character, but raspberries have like a high seed content, so a lot of the character come from those chemicals, and they're relatively.
It was still, I mean, still surprisingly.
Yeah,
good. Like
pretty bright, all of that, but like much more different. Subdued, and you're gonna develop some of the classic cellar character that you get from our beers. Yeah. Anyways, like you're gonna get the leathery character. It's gonna develop some oxygen, some tobacco, some oxidative nuttiness, and some tobacco notes. So those will balance out with the fruit, and the fruit will become more subdued over time.
Right. I noticed that definitely with plum. Like plum, like our first release of plum, we tried it, and if you try it, it's actually that spicy, the baking spice in the plum comes quite a bit forward. It's still plum character. Color's not as vibrant, but like it's still a really delicious beer. It's just a little bit different.
Yeah, they'll definitely change, and like some people will, and that's why I rephrased earlier. Some people will prefer that. Like the really bright, fruity character up front is like not for everybody. But when you try them out cellar, they are very, very good. Still, it's just they're gonna change. So, and then there are some fruits where I like tend to like not. I wouldn't recommend cellaring them just because they won't. They're less oxygen-friendly fruit, so that would be like something like peach, for example. I wouldn't want to cellar that one too long. Just it's pretty subtle compared to our other fruit beers to begin with, in comparison. But it also the compounds in those fruits tend to like not do well with that micro-oxygenation, and they'll kind of blend into kind of like the cellar notes that you get in a typical beer. So it'll become like very soft on the fruit and everything, and for me, and this is where my personal preference comes in, is I like my fruit beers to kind of like have fruit character. So after a certain age, it's just it's not really, it's diminishing returns.
Generally younger on the fruit beers, but if you had something like a cellar report that someone publised,
if only somebody was cellaring the beers and telling you,
which we are doing, and I think that's an important thing to consider is like, you know, and some can surprise us, right? Like I think you may find some like, and depending on what a person prefers, like you may find like when we had like a 30+ year old, I think it was about 35 years old is when we tried it, the raspberry beer. It was still an incredible experience. Very different, very, very different than when it was released. Yeah. But still really, really, really amazing to try.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, part of running a cellar too, if you are interested in cellaring stuff, is it's kind of an experiment. You are experimenting with things. Like some of the tips and stuff I've given are based off of experience and preference and stuff like that. But some things you just got to try. And like the quince beer, for example, that's a beer that no one else is really making quince beer all that much, especially in this realm.
Yeah.
And
we'll see, right? Who knows?
Yeah, no one's been doing it long enough to know, but there's certain like factors that we'll say, oh, I think this will cellar well. And for quince, for example, it's very high like tartaric acid and high tannin, and it's just got so much structure. And even like our first batch has been out for a little while now, and it's not showing any signs of breaking down, which also makes it like one of the reasons I really like that beer is it's held up very well. So like there are going to be ones that cellar better than others as well. Right. So and try it. Yeah. You got to experiment. I know you have a pretty robust cellar at home, so
put through the paces.
Yeah.
So any final things I missed, or any Fruitful Pursuits gems that we need to share?
I don't know. I mean, we could go all day if you let us go. But
I think these are the biggest points. I think the key ones are like what I want to get across was like our process, and like we said, there's different processes. They can lead to different results. I don't think one's better than another. But you know, I think we have a certain advantage that we have the whole fresh fruit, which gives you a different drinking experience.
I'd say if like people are taking this as like a learning experience or use it as like a jumping off point. Yeah. Like what we're doing is not the gospel or the manifesto as it were.
The manifesto.
But
okay.
But it's a good place to start. So, and there's tons of different ways to do this.
Well, thank you for sitting down with me,
to
me, talking to me, and sitting down with me to talk about this. We're done. I hope you enjoy it. Cool.
We're done. That's it.
That's it. We're
Done.
out. I'm out of here. I'm going.